just moments ago, and if you listen to the show, thank you, Rico. If you've listened to the show, you heard Rico and I talking about Jordyn Bahl. She has officially entered the transfer portal. So Jordyn Bahl, in a statement, released this that said, for the last 2 years, despite the amazing opportunities and accomplishments, my love for home and the acknowledgement of my foundation have grown. Being away from these things has been very rough, and she continues to talk about it. And then she says, my heart is full of gratitude and love for the girls, coaches, and people at the University of Oklahoma. Here's the kicker. I am excited to return home and be Jordyn Bahl, the softball player, but more importantly, the person. Now, without saying that she's coming to Nebraska,
well, Omaha's home.
Omaha and Papillion La Vista is technically home. So
St. Mary's is right there.
But, Austin, let's talk just about in the softball world on the larger scale, the magnitude of this decision. Now, Jordyn Bahl, once again, we went through all of her accolades prior to them winning their third straight national title, prior to her winning her second national title in just as many years. But this is a pitcher, Jordyn Bahl, once again from Papillion La Vista, who has a career 1.00 earned run average, a combined 44-2 record in her 2 seasons at Oklahoma, and has basically been the best player in all of college softball the last 2 seasons.
The best player on the best team.
Yeah, undoubtedly the best pitcher. And now, I mean, you could argue possibly Jocelyn Allo was the best player in all of college softball last season. But as a true freshman, Jordyn Bahl was the best pitcher on that team. And so nice catch, Austin.
Thank you.
So
still got it.
Just thoughts on this, preliminary thoughts on the move.
I don't know if earth-shaking for college softball comes close to describing this. And it's funny because it's such a big decision from maybe the best player in college softball, like you were saying, this year. Undoubtedly the best pitcher in the NCAA tournament, especially in the Women's College World Series. But it's Oklahoma, right? They'll find someone. They always do. That program will reload. But it's still new and shocking to see someone of Jordyn Bahl's talent level decide to enter the transfer portal. And again, it's not because of playing time. She didn't mention anything about NIL. So you're not going to get a better softball situation on the field, on the practice field situation than what she has down in Norman. But what this says to me, Nick, is that off the field, maybe she wasn't always as comfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't know, she credits Oklahoma, her teammates, her coaches for, working with her. But there's something to be said about just wanting to go home. I don't think this is a slight or a knock on Patty Gasso in any way, shape, or form. I think she's built an upstanding program that Jordyn Bahl obviously loved to be a part of for 2 seasons. It did a lot of good for her, and I think Jordyn Bahl did a lot of good for Oklahoma. But sometimes there are just things that coaches can't control, like a player wanting to go home, not being able to get comfortable as comfortable as they'd like in a new town. So it's a big blow to Oklahoma. At the same time, I think that they'll find a way. They'll move on. Yes. They'll find someone else good. Now, wherever she ends up, again, the signs are pointing to Nebraska.
Well, once again, in her Twitter and Instagram post, she posted the same thing on both platforms. She mentions, quote, I am excited to return home and be Jordyn Bahl, the softball player, but more importantly, the person. I am excited thinking about growing the game that has provided me so many opportunities for growth in the home state, a current overlooked state for girls in softball at all ages, and I am excited to finish the softball journey right where it began. So it's so hard I don't want to read too much into it. I don't want to pick this statement apart piece by piece and say, oh, well, that's home, that's Nebraska, right? But being realistic, that is the state of Nebraska.
Where else would it be?
Exactly.
I mean, your options feel like it's Nebraska, Omaha, Creighton.
Yeah.
Those are, I think, the most realistic options. And Nebraska's had the most success of any of those programs. I mean, Nebraska was in Hunter in the recruiting process. Yeah. And that's one, you can't blame her for wanting to go to Oklahoma for 2 years.
Absolutely.
As good as that program is, I mean, that's where I feel like she felt she could be pushed the best to learn, grow, and develop the best. But it's still just incredible that a player like that would enter the transfer portal. It's still new in college athletics where someone that good, leaves a place they've been so successful, so consistent.
And so we kind of we preliminarily thought about what are some of the most impactful transfers, right? So let's move on. We can talk. I mean, this is no doubt in the era of transfer portal the biggest one in the softball world.
Yes,
the biggest one in the softball world. DB, you want to join? Okay, so there it is. Okay, thinking across all sports, first one that comes to my mind, Caleb Williams was one.
Big one.
Comes to USC and wins the Heisman Trophy. And I guess are we talking era of transfer portal?
See, that's the thing, because you could say Baker Mayfield was hugely impactful. The way he transferred from Tech to Oklahoma, the numbers he put up. He's on that conversation. Kyler Murray, Justin Fields in that conversation. But Caleb Williams, the way he moved from Oklahoma to USC, winning a Heisman.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And that's the thing is Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts. That's And so
the thing about those guys is they didn't do as much in their first year. Well, Hurts did before he went to Oklahoma and then was replaced. Joe Burrow was a good college quarterback and then took it to another level. Caleb Williams was, oh my gosh. Rico says Cam Newton, but that's a JUCO transfer up.
Yeah.
I mean, Florida to JUCO to Auburn, right? Was his path?
Yep.
I think that's pretty much the list for football in the era.
I mean, and if we want to talk Nebraska, where's your head at?
Okay.
In terms all across all sports.
Yeah.
Because obviously, Trey Palmer was a huge one.
Huge.
That maybe as recent as it was, we forget that how crucial and how important he was to Nebraska's season. Trey Palmer was. And now maybe in 10 years down the road, we're going to look back and go, you know what? On a poor team that was coached by a poor coach, he stood out and somehow figured out a way to get to the league.
Right. Trey Palmer's on that list. You got to throw, I think, Casey Thompson in that list, because without Casey Thompson, is there Trey Palmer? And without Trey Palmer, is there Casey Thompson?
Yep.
The volleyball side of things gets interesting. Lauren Cook transferring in from UCLA.
That's right.
All Big Ten, first team All-American setter, but Nebraska didn't have the team success when she was there. You look at the time, I think a move of similar magnitude was Lexi Sun coming over from Texas.
Okay.
Maybe didn't result the same.
Kelsey
Robinson in there.
Coming from LSU.
Kayla Caffey.
Yep.
And Brianna Holman.
Yeah.
In the middle. So I think that's the conversation on the volleyball side. Men's basketball has had a lot of transfers, but clearly not Jordyn Bahl level or impact. In football, I'd also throw in terms of culture, I think Darian Daniels was a huge get.
Yeah.
But again, Jordyn Bahl is one of one in this conversation.
Well, when you look at the college softball world as well, you don't hear very often a player of this magnitude, and a player, let's also be honest, that Nebraska has a potential of getting, right? Nebraska has
better
an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes. And so just to read off her statistics once again, as a true freshman in 2022, had a 1.09 earned run average, went 22-1 in the circle for the Oklahoma Sooners, had 7 shutouts, 14 complete games, in 141 innings pitched, just allowed 22 runs all season in 2022. In 2023, could it get better? It could have. It did get better. Had a .90 earned run average, went 22-1 once again. That one loss was Oklahoma's one loss this season to the Baylor Bears early in the season. And then, so she goes 22-1 in 147 innings pitched. And so I should have looked up the graphic specifically, but there was a graphic of what she's done in the Women's College World Series against the top 8 teams, where it was 30 innings pitched and what was it, 1 or 2 runs allowed, I believe,
something like that. And
during this Women's College World Series,
Thank you. Go ahead, Rico.
During this Women's College World Series, she only allowed 1 run and had a .18 ERA in the 4 games that she pitched.
So, and she gave up that run. She gave up that run early. 24 2/3 scoreless innings is the 3rd longest streak in WCWS history.
Yeah. So once again, it's the move of this magnitude, I think, in just the softball world. We saw it similar last year in college baseball with Tommy White going from Tommy Tanks going from NC State to LSU and joining basically what is another powerhouse last year just in college baseball, that is.
Paul Skeens from Air Force to LSU.
That's right. And so women's basketball this year, Haley Van Lith went to from Louisville to LSU. They've created a super team with Angel Reese and Haley Van Lith down at LSU. And so it's just and Morrow, there was I'm blanking on her first name. But anyway, so just we're starting to see big moves through the transfer portal. And in this case, it doesn't appear to be NIL based.
I don't know how it could be. I mean, what softball program out there would have more money than Oklahoma? You know, what softball program would be better funded? I find it hard to believe there would be one out there, especially for a player of Jordyn Bahl's caliber. What don't you pay within, reason and budget for a softball program to keep a player of her caliber around?
Yeah. Well, and so don't forget also in the transfer portal, and Rico and I have talked about her on the happy hour before, Emma Koff. She's at Georgia Tech. She's from Georgia Tech. She was one of the first players in the entire country after the regular season, to enter the portal officially, make it public. And she was at Georgia Tech, was all ACC a couple of times. And so we're still waiting on official public word from her on her decision. But this could be a really beneficial offseason for Rhonda Revelle, who they've gotten to the regional. They've gotten to, now unfortunately they've been dealt Oklahoma State the last 2 seasons. They've had to go travel to Stillwater the last 2 seasons, but they've been to a regional. Now it's how can you continue to get over that hump, whether that's hosting a regional or whether that's going on the road to maybe a lower seed that you're matched up a little bit better with, and maybe upsetting them to go onto a super.
What is that next step to you? Because to me, it's hosting, being a top 16 seed, I think should be doable for Nebraska softball, but I'm willing to take that next step and not get sent to a top 8.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're pretty much going to do that, but if you can get to a 5-12 matchup or a 7-10 matchup, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so too. I also don't think hosting a regional is out of the question.
It shouldn't be out of the question.
Shouldn't be out of the question. And so you have a good core coming back. And when you look at maybe what they're returning next season, you're returning Captain Abby Squire. You're returning Ava Bredwell behind the dish. You're potentially bringing in one of the best pitchers in college softball.
Couple Andrews, right?
Billy and Brooke are returning. Kaylin Kinney is going to be healthy after her foot injury held her out for a little bit, extended period of time this season. So you look at these pieces and go, you want to get it done this season. You want to look and say you don't want that missed opportunity down the road.
Right. That's where you have to hope that Coach Revelle, Coach Sipple, and the rest of the staff have a plan. Because we've seen Nebraska in the just get talent phase and what that looks like out of the transfer portal. But as important as it is to get talent in the door and on the field, and regardless of the talent level, you have to have a plan for it. How are you going to deploy it? How are you going to push the talent you're bringing in to get better? How do they meld together with the team? How do you get them comfortable as quick as possible? And again, it's not just as simple as, can we do some, MLB The Show roster finagling and, we're magically good all of a sudden. No, there's got to be a plan in place behind the scenes, because we've seen super teams fail without a plan.
We've also seen, to an extent, going through the portal and or adding a bunch of new guys, Husker baseball has struggled to find a blend of guys, right? There's always a couple. I mean, even like this year, it was Casey Burnham, Gabe Swanson, and such. But, man, you would have liked to see the development from Drew Christo be a little bit more on the road or, publicly known, I think. And so and they go out and hire Mike Sirianni from Wichita State,
who brings in a transfer just now.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Shouts to Rico for this one. Gavin Blakowicz was a 2024 Wichita State commit. Not anymore. He is all N, as the kids would say.
There you go. So, and Wichita State just made a head coaching hire. They went out and hired Brian Green from Washington State. And so Wichita pulls the former Washington State head coach from Pullman, and they are now they've had a couple guys enter the portal. One of their best pitchers entered the portal yesterday as well. And I guess that's a good segue when we talk about pitching, because I don't think this will be all we hear from Jordyn Bahl. I think we're probably going to hear more down the road. But as we talk about pitching, and the super regionals were this weekend, obviously regionals were last weekend, Quinn Williams for Stanford yesterday throws 153 pitches in yesterday's season-saving win against Texas. Complete game, 9 innings, and so they end up throwing 153 pitches. And you think, okay, that's not anything. That's pretty bad for one time. That's quite a bit. Had 16 strikeouts, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
In a win against the Longhorns. But when you look at what he's done, he's thrown 120 innings the entire season for Stanford. Okay, potential first-round pick in the future. Back in the first game of the regional, he threw 114 pitches. That 2 days later, on Sunday, he threw 66 pitches.
For those keeping track at home, you're up to 180 right now.
And
180
then
pitches.
You throw in 156 yesterday, and you get the total of 336 pitches over the span of 2 weekends.
My gosh.
From the arm of Quinn Williams, a very talented Quinn Matthews,
yes.
Thank you, who's a really talented lefty for Stanford. And if you look at, if they get the job done tonight, college baseball fans are going to see him in Omaha come next weekend. But his arm's got to feel like rubber.
I don't know how he can raise it above even like his hip. Like, does he get more than like 30 degrees of separation? Can he swing his arm in a circle? I wouldn't be able to. It's legendary stuff. And that brings up, the age-old discussion of our college pitchers, overused, abused by their coaches. That's where I would love to know those conversations in the dugout with the player. Well, because I think we're past the point of coaches being dictators. You're going back out there whether you like it or not. I think we've advanced far enough to where it's a conversation. And what's the balance between trusting a kid to know how his arm feels and the head coach of, I got to do what's best for, yes, this individual player, but also the team.
Well, and so Quinn Matthews, I keep wanting to say Quinn Williams. Quinn Matthews, he said yesterday, I wasn't going out of that game. And so that's also somewhat of a, I think, cushion for a coach. The player is saying, hey, it was my call. Don't be mad at the coach for that. But also, this guy has a future, man.
He does.
This guy has a future. And in a sense, if this is a repetitive action that as a head coach you're willing to take, I'm not so sure that we can sit back and say you have their full interest at heart, because 336 pitches in 2 weekends is a lot.
336 pitches in a month is a lot.
Yeah.
That's, again, where it's a nice cushion for coaches as long as it works out.
Yep.
And what does it works out mean? It means the player is successful, the team is successful to some degree, and the player is healthy. Because let's say, Quinn Matthews would have gotten hurt. Let's say he's not able to throw in Omaha. Again, wishing the best for the young man. I hope he's on ice right now, completely immobile. Absolutely. As long as he stays healthy, through the MLB draft process, whenever that is for him, if he stays healthy, if, Stanford makes it to Omaha, it works out. The coach asked the player said yes, the player performed, that's great. The problem comes in when the player doesn't perform and you get a, kind of Dave Roberts, Clayton Kershaw thing where you're throwing your guy too much, he's not as effective, or you look bad if the player gets hurt. Even if the player says they want to go out there, that's when I think it calls into question, well, can we trust the coach to make the right decision for the player?
Well, remember Terry Collins and Matt Harvey?
Nick, you're asking a Royals fan.
That's true.
If he remembers Terry Collins and Matt Harvey.
That was one of the ones in recent memory that's really popped up. And what happens, this is an open-ended question because there's no significant or definitive answer that we can say. But anyway, so there's no definitive answer, but it's what happens when the player says, I'm good to go back in, and then ruins their potential career. That's where is that what's going to happen for something to be done, whether that's a cap, whether that's a closer look at responsibilities of a head coach or closer look at potential rest in between a certain number of pitches. And so I think that's where it's such a fine line in that moment, because you're sitting there, Stanford's up by however many runs, and you have your guy saying, "I'm good, coach," but he's at 135 pitches like Quinn Matthews was last night, and goes, "What am I supposed to do here?" Well, that's also on the coach if they didn't have anybody warmed up, if they didn't plan accordingly prior to that game to be able to use more pitchers, right? You got to be able to have more of a plan in place.
And that's the thing. I would assume that Stanford's coach had a plan to go to his bullpen. I don't think he expected 9 innings and 160 pitches
I hope so.
out of his guy. But I can see the temptation where you get to the 7th inning and you're like, okay, he's rolling. Yeah, I know he's at 100-ish pitches or so. But if we can save our bullpen, because you need everyone to be all hands on deck, Johnny Holstaff, in a super regional game 3 with the chance to go to Omaha. So I get the temptation to, keep throwing your guy out there. It worked out for them. They won the game. They should have about everyone that they could possibly ask for available out of the portal. But the other interesting thing is, of course, that as much as we can paint with broad strokes, each individual is different. Each player is different. Each situation is different. So there are those guys who are built different out there. Maybe Quinn Matthews is one of those guys who won't feel anything. Maybe he's back out there, playing soft toss today just because he is, built different, got that dog in him. Not everyone does. So then it comes down to how much do you trust the coach and how much are we willing to trust the coach's process of the decision-making versus the result that the decision, ended up with.
Well, and unnamed texter makes an interesting point. He says, or they say, so you brought up Terry Collins and Matt Harvey, but he was a grown professional. And that's understandable. I get that line. But you can't want to treat college athletes as professional athletes when it comes to the business side of things, but then act like they need a guardian and somebody there when it's in this case. You have to be consistent.
You do. The other thing about that is if you're going to treat Matt Harvey like a professional and he's a professional, yeah, he's professional. Say, yeah, coach, I'm going to go back out there, put me back in. But also the professional thing to do is, hey, Juris Familia is the best closer or second best closer.
At that time he was.
Best closer in the National League. I'm partial to my guy, Wade Davis.
Yep.
What gives him a better chance to win? Matt Harvey or a rested Juris Familia with a chance to push this series back to the best starting rotation in baseball that year with DeGrom, Syndergaard, and Matt. So, being a professional goes both ways.
And it's a tough decision or moment to make, obviously, because it's in the heat of the moment. Adrenaline's pumping. You're on a big stage
at home.
Is there some of that? Is there worry in some people's heads where it's, if I take him out and we lose, it's why didn't you stick with the hot hand?
We saw that 5 years later with Blake Snell and Kevin Cash.
That's right. Yeah, where they took him out. He was rolling. It took him out in the 4th, I believe.
4th or 5th. Because he hadn't gone more than 6 all year.
Yep, 4th or 5th, and he was puffing and puffing and trying to say, Coach Cash, keep me in, and they didn't, and they ended up losing. So that's a good point. If you guys did not hear at the top of the hour, Jordyn Bahl, the Oklahoma pitcher, has entered the transfer portal. So Patty Gasso, the head coach for Oklahoma, in fact, just released a statement regarding the departure of Jordyn Bahl into the transfer portal. And this is what
Strick blows my assist.
Strick, did he airball?
Chest pass. It was right there in rhythm. Sorry,
that's okay. That's okay. Strick's hitting some shots. Just drained a 3. Anyway, so I guess it was a long 2. Could have been the foot was on the line. But anyway, this is what Patty Gasso said on the departure of Jordyn Bahl. He said, quote, Jordy shared with our staff on Friday that she had been feeling a strong need to be closer to home for quite some time and that she had planned to enter the transfer portal. It was a very candid and emotional conversation. We are grateful for her 2 years with our program and for everything she accomplished. She obviously was a huge part of our on-field success, but I'll always appreciate Jordy and her approach, her dedication to the game, as she's the ultimate competitor. We're understanding of her situation and certainly want her to be the happiest she can be. We are supportive of her, and she will always be a part of the OU softball family. So
classy.
Once again, and that was just days after Patty Gasso, the Oklahoma head coach, said that Jordyn Bahl was the best pitcher that she's ever seen. That was one thing she said after Oklahoma won their 3rd straight national title as a softball program. So Jordyn Bahl enters the transfer portal. We'll probably talk more about that as well. I got a baseball guy in Austin Orman sitting to my left, and Rico, shout out to him for pushing all the buttons back in the studio. I want Rico to definitely chime in as the show goes on as well. So we'll go ahead and take a break. Once again, we're live from Lincoln Northwest High School. The Boys and Girls Club of Lincoln is hosting a junior NBA camp. Shout out to Rock Lloyd for having us out here. It's been a great day. We're still here till 4 o'clock. Strick is in the building. Austin, DP, myself, we're all hanging out here at Northwest High School. Make sure you stick around. More coming up next on the Happy Hour, 93.7 The Ticket.